This news
and a Golden Angel Award ceremony.
Hello, dear friends, my lovely audiences. Welcome to the East-West show that is exclusively sponsored by Wolfers, the Belgian royal family designated brand of jewelry with 400 years of glorious history that is hand-forged by 10 generations of the master craftsman, greatest master of craftsmen, which altogether stand for as a testimony to the spectacular and the share of the royal glory. That said, let's start the show today. Today with me is a good friend of mine, an educator and a philosopher, and a great thinker, founder and CEO of Maven Learning Resources, Mr. Aaron Rose.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
Welcome to the show. All right, good. And it's been a long time because he's been busy, and that I tried many times to get to his available appointment to come here to join me in the discussion. And as a matter of fact, I would end up discussing this subject with lots of other guests of mine, which I have a lot. I have numerous friends, resources, but to this subject, I typically prefer an educator who is on the educational job and a philosopher who's actually on the philosophical job thinking, and somebody who has a background or family history of philosophy. Well, that falls in the only ballpark of his. So once again, special welcome to you.
You do me too much honor.
Why would I spend so much effort and time in getting somebody talking one simple subject for my day in, day out business? In other words, if I had to spend this kind of effort to every show, though, I would have to have 700 days in the year, right? It is only because this is a subject that bothers me for so long. And all of a sudden, with the enlightening of a great book written by my dear friend Ivan Chang, I started thinking on the correct route. In other words, I try to bring the two words, discrimination and immigration, together. So they are separate words that have never been connected, or that has never have any connection inner, as long as I was concerned until now. So I want to start it by introducing you the title of today's show, Discrimination/Immigration. What's your take?
Well, I think discrimination and immigration are hand in hand, even though they have an opposite type of a dynamic. We discriminate against the things that we think might do us harm. We discriminate towards the things that we think will help us. And so America being this country of immigrants, we have a dedication to bringing people into the country, but at the same time we have a history of coming in, conquering, and throwing up walls to keep the next group of immigrants from coming in and conquering the lands that the previous group had conquered. So there's this concept of discrimination and immigration is almost built into the foundation of America.
At the same time. The same time.
Yeah.
And my dear friends, we started a very serious subject by which that we connect discrimination with immigration. And that exactly because that we have our dark page in history that we really have to, number one, touch it every now and then. Number two, make a profound understanding by our young people so that they will, number one, learn that we did something that we never supposed to do in history, and pass on the message to generation and generations for posterity, so that we know the history will not be repeated, right? So as an educator though, and of course I know that you help lots of young people to, to their subject choices, and even the selection of schools. Oh, by the way, why don't you go ahead and do a little introduction here?
Well, sure. Maven Learning Resources is a company that we founded to address a lot of the part of new immigrants actually coming to America. I myself spent about 12 years living in China as a young boy and as a college student and afterwards. And so when I moved back to America with my wife, we discovered that, first of all, we had a passion for education. I've been working in the field for most of my life. And second, that there was a need for people coming into the country to find ways in which they can perform at a competitive level, find their way into schools of their choice. And I believe that the topic that we're talking about today, about immigration and discrimination, is very much a part of that. It's built into the history of higher education and admissions, of one group of ideologies trying to protect a stronghold over the power reins of the country. And what are some strategies that students can use to kind of get past that and get over that, which is what do we do in our advising process? We also help with subject tutoring, SATs, and any kinds of subjects that students face in high school. But in regards to our topic today, I think that one of the key pieces of overcoming the negative discrimination, there's two different ways of going about it, right? You can join activist groups and interest groups that are trying to create a strong legal case to win over the structure that is, which typically goes into a kind of
But that's case by case.
That's a case by case.
You win one case, you lose the other. You win one case, you lose the other, and the problem goes on and on
Exactly.
and on.
If I defeat
we
you,
are
or
only
you defeat
repeating
me.
ourselves, right? Just like do basketball match.
Exactly.
Play basketball.
Right.
You win this, you lose next, and over again. There is no loser, there is no winner.
Right.
So the issue has never been solved.
Right. As soon as you lose, you get back into how do I win?
Unless we really flip all the way to the back of our history to start it from, say, day one of Mayflower. How about that? Right? We will see then on exactly the painful dark page that, number one, some people from a certain interest group will prevent young people to learn. And some wish that, okay, time will take care, people will forget. Number three, my friend Ivan, if I quote unquote from him, says, history is a good mirror, however, we never form a habit into looking mirrors ourselves. Yeah. And often, once you do look into the mirror, you see a stranger in the mirror. Yeah. That you never realize that was you already. Something that's quote unquote from that book. By the way, The Fourth Revolution of Rationality by Ivan Zhang is on the way of its publication. Right?
Yeah, I'm excited to read.
Sure, thank you very much.
The new English version, which is
sure. And you were part of it. You were at the Chinese version press conference, right?
Yes, I was there when he launched the original Chinese version.
Very worthy book. We're very much so a very worthy reading book. My dear friend, today with my brother Aaron Rose, founder and CEO of Maven Learning Resources, we finally decided to do something big on the major subjects. As a matter of fact, they are interrelated. Discrimination versus immigration. As a matter of fact, they are one subject.
Senator everything expected to change. It's like seeing John Wayne.
My name is Paul James. I host English News every morning.
And a Golden Angel Award ceremony.
Oh, dear friends, my lovely audience, welcome back to the East-West Show, exclusively sponsored by Wolfers the Belgium royal family designated brand of jewelry that has 400 years of a great history, hand-forged by 10 generations of the greatest craftsmen on the global earth. Together, they stand for a testimony to the spectacular and the share of the royal glory. That brings us back to the show with my friend Aaron Rose, an educator, founder and CEO of Maven Learning Resources. We decided today to do something big, by which we mean that we want to combine the subject of immigration and the subject of discrimination. To most people, they are thinking that they are unrelated, separate issues together into one, at which point we have to go back to history, right?
Yeah.
Back in history for that page, right after landing Plymouth of
Plymouth Rock?
Yeah. What did the native do?
Well, as far as I've read, they were quite welcoming, but I'm sure that's not universal truth. I think generally speaking, people are afraid of strangers. And so it would take great effort for them to offer a friendly hand to a new group of people. But that's apparently what happened, according to many accounts. And then we had...
Of course, one thing for the majority of those native people, they were called the Indians because mistakes were made anyway, right?
Yeah, they thought they'd had landed in India.
Yeah, that's a part of the other part of the whole story. But anyway, the Indians were helping them by offering them their food, pumpkins and potatoes, or things, so on and so forth. All right, even turkey, so on and so forth.
Corn, all the things we celebrate with Thanksgiving.
Yeah, that's why we celebrate Thanksgiving. For that part of, I believe, we did right, we make Thanksgiving a national holiday to remember that we owe somebody something.
Yep.
Right? And this owning something, the concept, will continue to always check ourselves, who do I still owe?
And I think the idea of Thanksgiving is actually very important for overcoming the kind of natural tendency towards negative discrimination.
Of course.
Right? So we see many examples where service can be a conduit for immigrants to overcome the kinds of barriers that they face when coming into America, or perhaps any country for that matter, is that you're serving the interests of the status quo, as it were.
Shortly after they settled, though, they started to realize with the limited resources, they have to master the land as the owner of the land. So the indigenous people had to be driven out from their own lands and own homes.
Right. Well, eventually the cultures collide because you have a different type of ideal for what the land ought to look like. And when those two things collide, then somebody has to change, or you have conflict.
And of course, the natives, they had no weapons, whereas the newcomers do.
Well, limited comparatively.
Yeah. And then that's why they were driven west, all the way. Now, from the point that we started with 13 colonies, right, to the point that we ended with 50 states, every step of the moving involves the driving of the Indians, of the native, all the way to the west.
Yep.
Until there are few left. So the law made it a mandate that we should remember at least 3 of them.
Right, well, part of this manifest destiny, as it were.
All right, go. Now, so do you think the newcomers of the colonies, right, the colonists, take the Indians with on an equal basis or on a discriminatory basis?
Well, absolutely not. I mean, in those days, Native Americans were referred to as savages. They were branded by the popular media, and that gave people, the colonists and the settlers, the legal right to go out and kill and to protect what they had outlined in the Manifest Destiny, which is a country going from coast to coast and controlling the entire land that is. So you have to discriminate negatively against any group of people before you can commit that type of atrocity.
If discrimination is one choice of the word, though, they did much more than discrimination.
Well, that's just the beginning.
Yeah, of course. Genocide.
Yes, absolutely.
Or genocide the whole race.
In many cases, there's tribes that are no longer around. There's a few that still remain,
Right.
but they're
And
vestigial.
not only that, because they're kind of like the old buffalo kind of what's called bison.
Bison, yeah.
Bison, the bison cows, right? Like the buffalo kind of.
Yeah.
That was the food of Indians. In addition to directly killing the Indians, they started a campaign to kill that bison.
That was their main food source.
Yeah.
Starve them out.
To kill the food resources. And in one area, used to be, I read one of the numbers saying that in less than 300 years, a land full of the bisons were killed down to only 200 of them.
Yes, I've heard those
And there are
stories too.
even fewer left. Right.
Yep.
Right. Now, you heard any of the skinhead policies?
Which ones?
It is passed as a law by the colonists, early colonists, right? You kill an Indian, a male Indian, you get $50 a reward.
If you bring their scalp.
Yeah, bring the scalp.
Yes, I've heard about these
A
laws.
skin will do.
Yeah.
You don't have to bring the whole bone. A skin will do. If it is a woman, 25. If it is the children below 13, younger than 13, 15, that was on record of history. You heard that?
It's a sad part of our history in this country.
That part of our history. See? So with that, the early settlers who betrayed their original thankfulness when they first arrived, they end up in a hateful way to decimate the whole race of Indians.
Very much so.
Of course, there are rebounds, right? And then with that, the contradiction started.
That's the beginning of immigration in America.
That's the beginning
in the modern version of it. If you don't go back to
Of
crossing the
course.
land bridge.
That started the original conflict.
Yeah.
All the way, when I learned in history, I learned one term saying that moving, west, 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 west. So moving west is in the blood of Americans, of Native Americans. For more than 300 years, close to 4, a generation after generation, they were on the wagons, the state wagon thing,
Yeah.
moving all the way west.
Yep.
So that's part of history. That's the base, how we establish this country.
That's what we call the manifest destiny when we learned about that in high school.
Yeah, manifest destiny. All right. Now, based on that, the nation was established. The 50 states was established. Wars were won. Territories were taken, such as California, such as Arizona, such as New Mexico, such as Texas, right?
Yep.
All the way until now. So, can we, as an educator, can we really forget that chapter?
Well, we can't forget it. We can only learn lessons from the
Are we
past.
forgetting it?
Some people like to try and forget it, but I don't think it's being forgotten.
Why would somebody try to make us forget it?
Well, there's many reasons why someone would like to obfuscate history for their
Such
own
as?
benefit. You could do that to create ignorance so that it's easier to control people. Ignorant people are easier to control. I mean, that goes back to almost any nation's governing policies. The more informed the general population is, the more unruly they become because it's easier to fool an ignorant person by telling them something that's easy for them to believe. So I would say the best reason for people in a power position to hide history would be just that, to stop dissenting opinions and to keep people's opinions going in one direction.
So, if you review the 100 tests, 100 questions of the immigration test, though, you will never find one talking about that piece of history and how the early settlers killed Indians.
It would not be the kind of thing that I would do when I introduce myself to a new friend either.
Yeah, shame.
It's typically the kind of thing that we like to not talk about because it's a shameful part of our history. So.
Typically, the kind of the thing we would exactly do the opposite, right? My dear friend, looking into history is looking at a mirror, right? And looking at the mirror is to see who you are, who we are. So never get surprised by seeing a stranger in the mirror, and that's why we started the two segments talking about history. And with me today is my dear friend, principal, founder, and CEO of Maven Learning Resources, who does a great job in basic findings of history in the basic education to our young people. Thank you for doing that, especially nowadays in a society when everybody talking about quick cash. What you do is really to be recognized very highly.
Thank you.
And let's take a moment out. When we come back, we'll continue how from that point on the foundation of discrimination turned out to be anti-immigration. So stay with us.
Everything is expected to be straight. It's like seeing John Wayne.
My name is Paul James. I host English News.
And a Golden Angel Award ceremony.
Hello, dear friends. My lovely audience, welcome back to the show, Jack Chow on the East-West Show, which is exclusively sponsored by Wolfers, the Belgian royal family designated brand of jewelry with 400 years of history that hands forged by 10 generations of the greatest craftsmen on earth. Together, they stand for testimony for spectacular and a share of the royal glory. Back to our show with my dear friend, our distinguished guest of the East-West Show, Mr. Aaron Rose, and the principal, founder, and the CEO of Maven Learning Resources. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Jack.
Right. By flipping the page in history, we found some darkest pages, also the most painful.
Some of the most painful
pages that our forefathers did.
Sure.
Right. I thought that the darkest page was that we once promoted black slavery, but on top of that, even before that, we did something even worse than the black slavery, right? We had this decimation of, genocide, almost genocide of the Indians as the indigenous people, right? They were down to very, very few until we finally decided to let some mercy. We let them remain some of the reservations, for which we have taken a great credit for everybody to remember if you have to pass a test. Right? Now, by doing what they have done for 300 to almost 400 years, a strong culture was established.
Indeed.
That you mentioned earlier about resources, the scarcity of resources.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
That means only by killing or decimate the indigenous, can the scarcity of resources be kept by themselves?
Well, yeah, I believe that much of the world's conflicts are predicated upon this belief that whether true or false can be questioned, but this belief that the resources at hand are scarce and therefore need to be protected for our group against another group. And I cite one of my favorite authors in history, in recent history, is Buckminster Fuller. He wrote the book Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth, and in that book he talks about how early sea captains were able to navigate by the stars and find economies of different economies where they could trade across those ports and create wealth beyond what had previously been possible. And so he talks about further than that, if you go through and you watch along the progression of technology, he comes to later in his book this concept of ephemeralization, which is the abstract concept that through technological progress, just like those early sea captains were able to create huge amounts of wealth by seeing different parts of the world, now in technology we're able to expand the capacity of our resources. And he says that through this advance we can do more and more with less and less until on that asymptotic curve that approaches but maybe never reaches zero, we can do everything with nothing. And this concept flies directly in the face of scarcity, which is at the heart of our modern economic theory and systems. And I believe that that requires a certain level of faith in some greater power that we're all a part of in order to see how we are more the same and more a part of the whole rather than apart from it.
Yes, yes. In other words, in conclusion, the scarcity of resources is the only source of problems, of all problems.
The belief in the scarcity of resources.
Oh, yeah. The belief, the solid belief in the scarcity of resources
Yes.
is the resource, as a matter of fact, of all problems.
It is definitely one of the underpinnings.
All right. Now, with that as a culture, solid culture founded in the early settlers, another name, our forefathers.
Yes.
Our forefathers, shamefully, our forefathers, right? They believe the best way to, now that they have the major job done, by which they mean that they have the Indians driven all the way out almost to water. Now the next important thing, to keep the scarcity, the scared resources of living, the most effective way is to stop newcomers.
Well, that's one militaristic approach.
All right. Now we're on the jackpot. The jackpot is that they learn, not only they learn, that they have that established as a culture, the best way to maintain what they have, to keep what they have, is to stop newcomers.
Right, and so
Make it hard for newcomers, as hard as possible.
and there's an inherent conflict built into our society because we have encoded in our Constitution these lofty ideals of equality and happiness and the pursuit of happiness. And at the same time, we have a very human side to us, which has been taught by economics to hold on to those precious resources so we can feed the people within our group. So there is that conflict that's part of this
another
experiment.
area that probably you and I need to clarify, including the fact that we earned the trust of France,
Yes.
for which they give us the Statue of Liberty, including the name of the land of the free, home of the brave, for which we learned we were given a huge credit. Those are from outsiders.
Yeah.
As to ourselves, as the Congress of the United States, we never declared that. We never declared that.
The Statue of Liberty.
Of course, it was not until 1930, 36 or 39, I cannot be precise on the year, did the Congress confirm what's written on the
plaque.
the which is the base of Statue of Liberty.
Right.
They give it to me whatsoever the Emma Lazarus poem as the American spirit.
Right, which has recently been replaced.
Reason being replaced?
Yes.
That I don't know. That you have to give me another lesson.
Oh, well, the recent administration replaced that original poem with give me, I can't remember the exact wording, but basically the gist of it is now we want people that can take care of themselves, not just you're wretched and you're weak.
Oh, no. Original written, I have it here, on which, well, during the break I can find for you. But anyway, go back to that. Okay, now, in educating people, that we should be grateful to who we are, the Congress has done nothing until 1930s or 37 or 39. All right. So all the credit were given by others. They impose us, they push us to continue doing what we do.
Right.
Because the people who came for new opportunities did find opportunities.
Absolutely.
Right? So they call the land of opportunity. It is what they call us.
That has been America's
We
dream.
never, as a Congress of the United States, never said anything, come on in to the land of opportunity. We never said that ourselves. Right? Never said that until ourselves. So now, what the forefathers, the early settlers, not only learned but have established a solid culture was that to prevent newcomers. Exactly on the contrary.
I think it was both. The beacon was lit. America was known to be the land of opportunities, and seeing the threat of wave of immigrant after wave of immigrant, some measures were taken to try to mitigate that threat while at the same time keeping the beacon alive.
Yeah.
So there's that conflict inherent in the...
But the beacon blinks,
Yes, indeed.
right? It shines, it dies, shines, dies. At a time when we did need people, we shine, we need them. At a time we get the job done, we kick them out.
Right, you were telling me when the donkey stops pulling the mill,
Yeah, sure.
eat the donkey.
Well, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, exactly. When the milling job is finished, we eat the donkey. We kill the donkey and slaughter the donkey.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, now, take the Exclusion Act, the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882.
Right.
Right? It was because the Pan-American Railroad was done. The job was completed.
And we
right?
had no other idea
During
about
which time
what
we
to
need
do.
we need lots of them. There are more than 13,000 of them exported. We imported from China,
Right.
right? And then there are about very little remain after that. Right? And the Chinese Americans did about 98% of the most dangerous job, such as the Sierra Madre Mountain.
Right. And that was because they were high-skilled labor.
Yeah, that section though.
Yeah.
Right? Right after the job was done, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Right. And it's very convenient, for the American government to do so because the Chinese people come in with different culture, different language. It's very difficult for them to advocate for themselves within a system of a foreign language. So the challenge is much harder than if you were to say go to another English-speaking country and import that same type of labor. So yeah, it was a convenient move to get something built and then.
So the beacon, the beacon light blinks. That fact, at least we can confirm that. Well, there are moments when it shines, there is moment it dies, right?
Yeah.
Goes on, back and forth.
Just like
Always
the star
like
in
that.
the sky.
Twinkling,
Twinkle, twinkle, little star.
right? That kind of thing. All right, my dear friends, it looks that we have found the trail about the connection between discrimination and immigration. I call it the anti-immigration, the concept of anti-discrimination. It is because the best way to keep the limited resources is to stop newcomers from coming.
Yes, according to one's scarcity mentality, yes.
All right, very good. All right, with me is my dear friend, Mr. Aaron Rose, founder and CEO of Maven Learning Resources. And I believe that we're really touching something big today. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Claims everything expected constraint. It's like the same wrong way.
My name is Paul James. I host English News.
And the Golden Angel Award ceremony.
Hello, dear friends, my lovely audience. Welcome back to the show, Jack Chow on the East West with my dear friend, Mr. Aaron Rose, founder and the CEO of Maven Learning Resources, which is a wonderful education organization, 12 years in history, that has been doing a great job in the community by helping lots of young people to find the right school and also to find the right major for their study, right?
And
so
hopefully help them.
little introduction of once again, please.
Well, in keeping with our topic today, I'd say one of the things that we also help students to do is to overcome some of these kind of institutional forms of discrimination by finding pathways to integrate better into the community. Well, it's easy to look at all of the faults that we've had. You can also go back and see all the reasons why people did those things in the past. But in the present day, one of the things that I like to focus on for students and for new immigrants is service. And that can be different forms of service depending on the individual. Sometimes it can be in the form of like an ROTC program that leads to military service, but it can be in other forms of service to the community. And many of the students that I work with will ask me, how many service hours do I need in order to get into a good college? And I think it's kind of a funny way of putting it because it undermines the core process of giving and reciprocation, right? So I think very much that service to one's community, service to one's country, to one's organization is what keeps you as a part of that and allows people to get past their initial discrimination and prejudice, because those are built into us as a survival mechanism. If you look differently from me, then my first instinct is to keep you away and kill because you're a threat. But as soon as I can start to see you providing value to me in the form of gifts, in the form of service, that will start to change my perception of you. So when students come to me and ask how many hours does it take, my answer is as many as you can give, because the more you're giving, the more people around you see that you are not a threat, right? And so,
yeah, you're right.
So whichever way that we would like to serve others is a form by which we can overcome both that scarcity mentality that we talked about, because by giving, we teach our subconscious mind that we have whatever it is we're giving, we have an abundance of that thing, whether it's my time, whether it's a gift, a resource.
That exactly reminded me of the cultural trend.
Yes.
I call it a trend. And by the way, as a EDI on the EDI team, a member on the EDI team, I have been in my hands busy with 21 years of community event called the Full Moon Happy Family event, which is the cultural festival.
Is that for the Moon Festival? For the Chinese Moon Festival?
Moon Festival. And of course, all the past 21 years, we put a 1 day or even 2 days wall-to-wall entertainment with the food, lots of good stuff.
Absolutely,
right?
great.
Okay. With our effort, with the EDI efforts. And speaking of performers, though, it started recent years. They asked me for recognition. In the past, never cared. Now they want the organization, as a sponsor of such event, to confirm Mr. Aaron Rose in appreciation for your performance, which helps the community building, and that recognition, the piece of paper, and they like it, they need it. In other words, the value, what you promote, to pay back to the community is being recognized.
More and more. Even
More and more.
a few years back, Harvard issued a paper about turning the tide in higher education, and more and more colleges are picking up this concept of we want people that are nice to each other, people that have virtues, people have those moral virtues of inclusivity, because the competitive nature of higher education and admissions has created a culture of kind of elbowing to get that first position. And the people who are sitting in the administration offices see this and are asking themselves what to do. So I think it's one pebble in a sea of a very competitive culture that we have here, built on this kind of free market idea and capitalist tendencies towards wealth accumulation and capital versus labor. So these concepts are very broad and encompassing. I don't know if we have time to unpack all of them today.
Yeah, we do not have time to unpack that, but we really confirm that's a good way to approach, right?
Well, I get back to the idea of service, right?
Yes, of
because
course.
it's a simple thing that we can do is find an organization that we would like to support and give of ourselves, and that process lowers people's defenses and increases people's appreciation, and they want to reciprocate naturally.
Of course, that's a good move. That's a good direction. But the obstacles on the early commerce side, so strong, being so strong.
Always.
As a society, the concept is so strong, the protection, the self-protection concept was so strong, so that they reject newcomers.
Absolutely.
That's why you'll find immigration harder and harder and harder.
Yeah.
And you'll find the waiting time longer and longer and longer.
Well, especially these days in current political climes with trade wars and all of that,
Yeah,
that gets
exactly.
exacerbated by those conflicts.
Speaking of the contribution to the society, though, it was last week with Mr. Mike Yin. Mm-hmm. I consider him as an educator too.
He's a great man. I love hearing him speak.
I love him a lot, right? He and I kind of mentioned that now in this society we have, we have immigrations almost in every aspect of the life. Yeah. We have immigrant teachers, right? Not only do we have students, we have immigrant teachers.
Absolutely.
And we have scientists, researchers in NASA, in JPL, who are the immigrants.
And it's absolutely one of the things
we have
that
professors,
makes this country
they're
great.
Immigrants. Mm-hmm.
The immigrant population is well known to be one of the greatest assets of America. We call it the brain drain, you call it whatever you want, but it's because people are still willing to come and contribute to this society that America remains to be one of the great cultures of the world. If not the preeminent culture as is today. But go back to China. I think one thing that the Chinese population has in a different perspective is this concept of this Confucian ideal of, friends coming from afar, isn't that a wonderful thing, mm-hmm. right? And also the gift-giving culture. If in China, it's rude to show up anywhere and not have a gift. And it's drilled into people at such a young age that it is ubiquitous, and it's a cultural difference, but I think it's an asset that Chinese culture has of constantly giving those gifts, even on a small scale, because it kind of loosens the stones in the wall, so to speak, so that people are still willing to see you again as something other than a threat.
That's exactly why we have an educator here to talk about such an issue. Because it is simply, to me, that I follow two rules. Number one, if you are looking for an answer to a certain issue, mm-hmm. you look into history, you look into money, right? If you really want a solution for certain problems, you look into education. Right? That's why and we have you here.
Well, thank you.
So from an educator's point of view, though, to educate our young people, to give, right?
Definitely.
To contribute to the society, make them less scary,
Well, it's easy to embrace someone who has something to offer.
not a threat,
Yes.
right? Probably the early comers would lose up
Yeah.
on their protection,
Right.
right? After all, one thing we want to confirm as a conclusion of today's show, though, it was the early settlers who settled, and shortly after the settlement, they learned two rules by slaughtering the Indians. Rule number one, that the less of the indigenous people, the less challenge they face, right? Rule number two, the less newcomers, the safer they were. So the contradiction between discrimination and anti-immigration belong to the same rule as a conclusion.
Definitely two sides of the same coin, I believe.
All right, that's two sides of the same coin. My dear friend, I really wish we have 100 minutes in an hour so that we may stretch it out. But anyway, we're out of time. Thank you very much, my dear friends, for watching. And thank you, Mr. Rose, for coming here, for sharing.
Thank you for having me, Jack.
Keep up the good work.
All right.